Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host today. I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. Before we get stuck into today's episode, which is the October News and AMA Ask Me Anything episode. I do one of these every month. I'd like to remind everybody that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is supported by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, I'd appreciate you going over there, click on a join link. And while you're here, if you find this video interesting and helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Pod Save Chocolate YouTube channel, share it with your friends, put a comment in it. It would be very, very helpful in spreading what it is that we're doing here today. And as always, if you're watching, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, go into the live chat in YouTube, go into the comments in LinkedIn or Facebook, and let me know where in the world you are connecting from, so I can get that shout out up on screen. It's always nice to know where in the world that people are connecting from. And if you have a question or a comment about anything that I'm going to be talking about today, you can put it into the comments and I will get that question up on the screen and ask it and do my best to answer it during the course of the episode. And if not, I'll answer it afterwards in the comments to the post. And with that, if you're a regular visitor here, you'll know that I produce a post on the Chocolate Life for every single episode. And if you're listening to this in the audio podcast, there are now 50 of them uploaded. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast, one of the reasons why I put together these posts on the Chocolate Life is so that you can refer to them after the fact. So you can go into them and you can find the links to the resources. You don't have to follow along with what it is that I'm doing here. You can go back and you can say, hey, Clay talked about this interesting story, or he mentioned this particular resource on this website or story, whatever it was. I can go to the post for the episode and I can find the link to it. So if you're watching, this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. And as I said, for every single post or every single episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post. And this is the post for today's episode. It's an October theme. It's marshmallows with googly eyes and jack-o'-lantern faces drawn on to the marshmallows, because Halloween is coming up and it made sense to do something vaguely Halloweenish for an image for the episode. And with that, what I want to do is I want to start off with today's episode with the news. And I try to start off the news every single month with a discussion of where the cocoa markets are. And what I've done is I've put the links to the markets in a table to just make them more accessible. And so if we look at what's going on with the futures market, I use a website called barchart.com. Excuse me for the pop-up there. And what we can do is we can look and see what the futures price is for cocoa. And we can see that the cash price today is at around $6,985. And we can look and see what it is for the rest of the year. So we're looking at November and December. And then we can look at what it's going to be in September of 2026. And what we see, just based on the daily prices that are listed here, is that there is a slow, consistently downward trend in the price of cocoa between now and roughly 2 years from now. However, that 2 years from now, at about $4,500 a ton, the price will be about $1,000 a ton more than it was a year ago. So that's what it is. That just a straight look at what the futures market is telling us. However, what we might want to do is we might want to go look and see at this compared with the historical price. And what I'm doing here is, here are some links. And here are the ways to think about using some of those links. So with the historical price, again, I get a little more data about where things are moving. And one of the things that's important about it is, for example, I'm highlighting right now the December 2024 futures price. And what we can see what it is, the last trade that was made for December. We can see what the 1 year high, the 52-week high is. So December is currently traded a little over 7,000 a ton. A year ago, it was a little over 10,000 a ton. The low, however, was down at around $3,300 a metric ton. And so what we see is a huge range, a huge amount of volatility in what the pricing is, even though it went up almost to 3 times the price that it was a year ago. It's down to about 2 times what the price is a year ago. And so the first two charts sort of reinforce each other. They give us a better idea or a more informed idea about where price movement is going to be. And then there are summaries for 2026, 2025, 2024, 2023. And you can very, very quickly look at these and go, oh man, this is where the price is going. So if you are somebody who likes to look at tables of numbers, this is a really good way to go get a view of the market. Another view that I like is a view which is called a moving average. And so again, I'm looking at December 2024 cocoa prices. We've got the cash price here, but the 20-day moving average. So this lets us know what the average price is within the last 20 days. So within the last 20 days, the price was around $7,500 a ton. Within the last 50 days, it was actually a little bit lower. The 50-day average is about 73.50, 73. The 100-day moving average is even lower. And the 200-day moving average is significantly lower than that. And so looking at these moving averages, what we can do is we can get another example of sort of the trajectory of the pricing. It's another way of thinking about volatility within a certain time frame. Again, if you're interested in looking at tables, this is a great way to look at it. But this is also a chart on a website called Trading Economics. And what they do is, one of the reasons why I like this is they give us a quick summary of what things are going on. So, cocoa futures are trading at around $7,100 a ton, not far from an eight-month low of $6,900 a ton, which was yesterday, on easing concerns over supply. And so, this is why people are thinking that the price is trending down, that they're less concerned about where supply is going to be. Dealers say that favorable weathers in top growing countries, Ivory Coast and Ghana, continues to weigh on prices, right? There is also one broker who says that, right, they expect a surplus next year, the first time in 4 years. So you can get some idea about where things are, so there's some explanation by some traders about where they think the market is going. But I think, in looking at the chart, one of the things that's interesting is that I'm now looking, if you're watching, but you can go back and take a look at this yourself. I'm looking at the 1-year chart, and it gives you a sense for what the volatility is. I mean, we see that, the high is way up here at 12,200, April 19th, not that long ago, right? And we're down here. But for the most part, it's been trading up and down, within a range in the last month or so of between $10,000 and $8,000 a metric ton, right? But if we go take a look at what the 5-year volatility chart looks like, you can just see that, for the 3 or 4 years, or for the period 2020 to early 2024, the price was essentially flat, right? So, okay, that what we're seeing is a lot of volatility and change in price in a very, very short period of time. We knew that already, right? We were familiar with that already. But if we take a look at the narrower ranges, so now I'm looking at a 6-month chart, you can get an idea that, trading, while it has been volatile, the volatility has been within a fairly narrow range, again, between 8,000 and 10,000 a ton. If we look at the 1-month chart, we can see, there was a spike that we had in late September, but for the most part, it was fairly flat for much of September and October, and it's been a downward trend for the month of October. And so, these are two different ways of looking at the same numbers to get an idea about what the volatility is. The reason I want to go over this every single month is, number one, it's interesting for me, and I hope it's interesting for you. What can we learn? But if you're in the business of buying cocoa beans, or if you're in the business of purchasing derivatives, cocoa butter, cocoa powder, cocoa nibs, anything, then all of those things that you're buying are based upon these prices, right? And so you need to know what they are. By understanding what the long-term trends are going to be, it'll help you make better decisions around buying, right? You can talk to your suppliers and you can say, hey, I know price has gone down. or prices are expected to go down. What can we do about that? All right, well, how can we do that? So, I wanted to go and talk about that because that's the charting perspective, right? So there's some editorial around that. This is again on barchart.com, which is cocoa prices are settling sharply lowered as chocolate demand craters. So this is different from an oversupply of cocoa beans, right? It's the prices are dropping because consumers are buying less chocolate, right? And as the demand for chocolate goes down, the demand for cocoa beans also goes down. And if the demand goes down, the price goes down with it. So cocoa prices settle sharply lower. And this is from a week ago. And it says they plummeted. Again, this is from last week, plummeted for a second day and posted short-term lows. Concern about weak chocolate demand hammered cocoa prices after a trader, Jeffries, warned that chocolate sales are notably underperforming other snacking categories. So people are continuing to snack. They're just trading out chocolate-based snacks with sugar only, so sugar candy confectionery, or carbohydrates, grain-based snacks. So, and they're looking to go to cheaper snacks. So in a supportive factor for cocoa prices, ICE monitored cocoa inventories held. So immigration, customs, right? ICE. The stocks held in U.S. ports have been trending lower for the past 15 months and fell to a 15-year low. So what's interesting about that maybe is there is physical inventory of cocoa, which is held in ports of entry. So there are physical stocks of cocoa in New York and Los Angeles, or the port of New York and New Jersey, and Los Angeles, probably Philadelphia as well, maybe Boston, San Diego, Seattle, Houston. So they're stocks, Miami, they're stocks which are physically held in the port. And what happens is that makers will preferably draw from those stocks in port because they have been purchasing those stocks at preferential prices based on trading models. And so if the stocks are at an all-time low, what that may be is that they're working through expensive inventory. Might be one reason why the stocks are low. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to balance relatively expensive cocoa with cocoa that might be cheaper. That might be one reason for doing it. And lower cocoa production in the Ivory Coast was reported, with the Ivory Coast farmers shipping 1.76 million metric tons of cocoa to ports from October to September, down 25% from the last year. So, all of this reduction in price is happening as at least Ivorian farmers are reportedly shipping a lot less cocoa. And so we need to balance what the impact is, understanding supply and demand, what it is that's going on here. And these are complex interrelated topics. Now, you will have the link. I've highlighted a couple of things on these pages. These highlights are me; they're for my browser. If you go and look at these, you're not gonna see the highlights. But you can read these. It's only a 3 or 4 minute read, and it'll give you a really interesting idea if you want to know what the people who follow the markets think about this, what's going on. Now, all of this is happening. Interesting when the market for cocoa processing is set to hit $16 billion by 2032. So you can go take a look at this and understand what they mean by cocoa processing. And so if we have, for example, 4 million metric tons at $12,000 a ton, what's that? $4.8 billion or something like that, right? Does that include the cost of cocoa processing, which would be transforming the beans into paste and other derivatives? I don't think so. Take a look at what this means. But the global market is going to grow to US 16.4 billion by 2032. Now, this is out of International Confectionery Magazine. I'm the technical editor for International Confectionery Magazine. And one of the things that I do notice about IC Magazine, which I also notice about Confectionery News, is they don't post links to sources, which I wish they would do. So I have contacted the editors. My editor is out of the office on annual leave. Hopefully I will be able to get the link to the source for this. And if I do get the link to the source for this reporting, I will let you know and put the link to the source in another post. Or depending on the forum, I may actually add it into this post because I think it's really important. I mean, I have some background because I've been reading this stuff, but I want you to be skeptical consumers of information, right? You can, I do my best to report things accurately. I'm not 100% correct, right? I make mistakes. I do my best to do my due diligence, but I think it's really important that all of you learn to be skeptical consumers, that if there is a report and the report says X and Y and Z, that what you do is say, okay, where are the primary sources? Where can I go and look to find out where this reporter is finding the information that they're reporting in this article? There's also some interesting things in here which talk about the why, right? So they talk about a report. They don't talk about where the report comes from, but they talk about increasing awareness of health benefits, all right? The idea that there's a region, the Asia Pacific. So and this is, 2 weeks old. So it's, again, it provides color and context so that as you're thinking about your cocoa purchasing decisions, and in some case, it may be new product development decisions, right? That you want to think about. And that's why spending half an hour a week or an hour a week going and looking through the market news, I spend more like an hour a day, and trying to cherry pick the ones that I think are interesting and valuable for everyone to know. But what do you think? I mean, how do you think about the volatility in the price of cocoa? Has it affected your business, and how has it affected your business? And what sort of strategies are you using to mitigate the volatility? Has it changed your buying practices? Has it changed the way you think about the products that you're making and selling? And these are, the conversations that here at The Chocolate Life and on PodSafe Chocolate, we've had over the course of the last 6 months or so as we've been following along this story. And then finally, maybe a good news aspect of this, or a silver lining in the dark cloud, is that both Ivory Coast and Ghana are raising the farm gate price to the farmers. And for this particular story, Ivory Coast, which is normally very closely pegged to Ghana in terms of the price they pay the farmer, is starting to pay farmers more than Ivorian farmers more than the farmers in Ghana are paid. Now, again, one of the challenges here is there's no link to the source article. So you do need to go do some additional research if you want to go do it, if you want to go find out the details about this. But what they say is that the new price in Cote d'Ivoire is equivalent at the farm gate price to $3,060 per ton, right? Which surpasses the $3,039 per ton offered in Ghana. Now, it's really interesting to know, right, that this is the farm gate price in Ghana of a little over $3,000 a metric ton, is that normally the price to the farmer in Ghana is discounted from the market price by about 40%. So if the market price is $2,200 a ton, then the farmer is getting somewhere around $1,700 a metric ton. And so what we have to be careful. So even though the farm gate price in Ghana is 3,000 metric ton, what we do is we find that, the spot market price, which is today's cash price, is close to 7,000 a ton. So the farmers are making roughly 3/7, which is 42% of what the market price is, and that's comparatively high. So which is a good thing, and a lot of other prices are set based on this the market price of cocoa. So things are mark to market. So it might be market price plus a $100 country premium, or the market price plus $250 in terms of the organic premium and things like that. So it's really important to understand those relationships when we start going and looking for things. Now, all of this is complicated. I want everybody to know, in case you hadn't read, is that the European Union, right, looks like it's going to delay the start of implementing the EUDR by 1 year, right? So we're looking for the EUDR to come into force on December 31st of 2024. And it looks, because there's a lot of uncertainty around how the regulations will be enforced and who does what and who's responsible for X and Y and Z, that they're going to push off the implementation for 1 year. And, there's a lot of advertising to be seen. So just a really, really quick look to know. I've got the link to this story on Reuters. You can go and read it. You can talk about why people are doing it. And it's just, the way that I would describe the reasoning is the EU was not clear in its guidance until relatively recently. Now, we can look at one of the reasons why prices have been trending downward, right? And we may see a sharper downward price trend is because people go, I have another year before I need to worry about the EUDR compliance. To make sure that I don't have to, that I have all my ducks in a row, that I have, I've got the geofences around my farms. I've got all the processes in place to be able to document where it is that I'm getting the cocoa. Having another year is making the entire industry take a deep breath. Confectionery News also wrote an article about this. The EU proposes an EUDR delay. We still don't know if it's actually going to be delayed. But one of the things which is interesting about this this post on Confectionery News is relatively unusual, is there are external links. So we have the EU Commission has proposed a delay, but it released additional guidance, and it's a link to the actual guidance on the Europa.eu website. So there's a statement by the commissioner on the Europa.eu website explaining the extension on the EU. So if you want to know the official explanations, this is where you'll find the official explanations, which is why I think, again, it's important that you do your research and that you go and try to find the primary sources that these articles are referring to. Now, there's a block in here. So Cowbisco, which is an industry group, calls for urgent EUDR update, right? So there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now, a lot of writing that's going on about the EUDR. The thing I think you need to pay most attention to if you do any business in the EU in cocoa or chocolate or any of the commodities, so coffee, soy, the commodities which are fall under the EUDR, is that you pay very close attention to this implementation schedule. Now, what it's likely to mean is that even though you have you think you have all of your EUDR ducks in a row, right? When it comes to actually being liable for any of the civil penalties under the EUDR, you may have some time, right, to make sure that things are double checked, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. You have everything set up properly, which is a good thing. And excuse me for that. I am. All right, so I lost my screen share for a moment. Excuse me. All right, so that's back. So this article in Confectionery News is a good place to go and find some resources, official resources for the story. Now, that's I may get back to some of this. I've got lots of things that I've got bookmarked to talk about, but I wanted to go through these at a very, very high level and spend the majority of the time this month on those stories. Because again, if you're in the world of making chocolate and you buy cocoa beans or derivatives, this is a central economic issue for you, especially if you're a small maker and you don't have any leverage. So you don't have enough monetary resources to be able to start hedging in the futures market. I mean, you don't have that, but you just don't have that. You don't have those economic resources to do that. Right? So that's why I think it's really, really important that we spend the time every month talking about this. So one new study, I will put the link to this PDF into the page for today, the post for today's episode after the fact. But recently, the National Confectioners Association posted its 2024 Get to Know Chocolate Consumers survey. This is a couple of slides from the executive summary. You have to be a member of the National Confectionery Association in order to be able to get at the full-blown report. Keeping in mind that this was sponsored primarily by Barry Calabout. It was done in the month of August, and it covered about 1,600 consumers, which, depending upon the selection methodology, which we don't have here, would be statistically significant in terms of being an accurate representation. So the highlights that everybody wants to know, the highlights that you should think of, number one is that chocolate is the largest confectionery category. There are three, right? There's chocolate confectionery, there's sugar candy, right? And then there's gums and mints. And so the chocolate confectionery category, it represents about 56% of total sales, right? But what's interesting about this, if we look at the last year trend, is that we find that the dollar value associated with this 56% of total sales has risen by 1.5% in chocolate, but it looks like sugar candy and gums and mints have both grown at 3 to 3.5 times more. So while there is growth in chocolate, that growth in chocolate is slower than it is in the other confectionery categories. Good to know. That 1.5% increase in total sales volume, dollar sales volume, right, is also, we look at it, is that in terms of unit sales are down by almost 5%, right? And that's a lot greater than it is in either sugar candy confectionery or gums and mints, and that the volume is down as well, right? And so what this is telling us is that people are buying less chocolate and they're paying more for it, right? Now, they're buying more as a percentage of both sugar, right, candy, confectionery, and gums and mints than they are with chocolate, right? And the decline, so the increase, in part because the increase in prices in those two sectors have been less than the increase in prices in chocolate. So really, really important to understand that dynamic. Again, I will put a link to this study. You can take a look at it and you go, oh, interesting. That's what this means. Before I get to the next post, what I want to do is I want to give a quick shout out to North Queensland chocolates. Hey, greetings to Oz. I have a special place in my heart. I have family members who were born in Australia. I have great times visiting in Brisbane and the Whitsunday Islands, been out to the Blue Mountains, Sydney, Melbourne, down to Geelong and to Anglesey. It's just, it's a lovely country. I love visiting there. People, and again, I've got close family members who are from there. And just thanks for the information and the time you put into this. It's my pleasure. I do it for you, obviously. I mean, I share it with you for my followers on Facebook, people who connect with me on LinkedIn, for members of the Chocolate Life. But this is also useful for me in two areas. Number one is it's a discipline, right? I need to keep up with this information because it helps me in my general practice, right? But also talking through these things helps me internalize these as well. So this is really, really valuable for me, and I'm glad that you find it valuable for you. So thank you very much. So with that, yeah, if you're listening, go into the comments, LinkedIn, Facebook, the live chat on YouTube. Let me know where in the world you're connecting from. Also, if you've got a question about anything that I say or a comment, you can do that as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this a thumbs up and join the PodSave Chocolate channel. And if you're not a member of The Chocolate Life, go to TheChocolateLife.com and become a member to support the work that we're doing. I'm not doing Patreon, right? I'm not doing, any form of advertising. That's going to change, however. One bit of news is I've added a new advertising segment on the homepage, just one position at the top of the page. If you're watching, let me show you where it is. There's going to be one position at the top of the page. It's going to be above the pinned rail of 4 stories, and below, this is called the CTA, click to action, bar, so it's just an announcement bar. Right? There's going to be an advertising segment that's going to go in between there. And at the moment, I'm going to restrict it to promoting festivals and conferences. So if you have a conference or a festival that you'd like to promote and you'd like to put it up on the homepage of The Chocolate Life, you can let me know. And I'm going to provide more information about that. But it's just this one advertising position. Now, having said that, if you go over to the archive site, I'm still working on SSO. You'll notice there's a member marketplace section, which is over here, broken images and things like that. I'm going to be on the archive site. I've got 2 advertising positions on the home page. And then when we go to the forums page, there are 2 advertising positions. And so I'm going to be, again, promoting festivals and things like that on these pages, because I think that's a good way to use the space on the website. Right. So, all right. Back to where we're going. So the NCA study. So what we do is we find that there have been some real interesting changes, right, in how the average consumer is buying chocolate confectionery as well as to sugar candy confectionery and gum and mint. So take a look at this and go, okay, what does this mean? So if you have a retail store, what it may mean is that you may want to, in addition to your chocolate bars, you may want to have other kinds of products, maybe made by other people, right? But there are lots of interesting simple sugar candies that you can make, like brittles, right? And other kinds of toffees that you could add to your you could add to your product mix. Number one, that may not have chocolate in them, and so would be less to produce, but they represent a really fast-growing segment of the marketplace in terms of dollar volume. Really important to consider. So you can use this to help you go, well, mints. What kind of mint might I be able to do? Right. And, the mints here they're talking about are breath mints and, a brand name Tic Tacs and things like that. But it does provide some interesting guidance that you might want to go take a look at it. So quick shout out to Mark and Yuri from Kittredge, Colorado, and Blue Spruce Chocolates. Never miss a monthly news in AMA. Thank you very much. I hope to make it to Kittredge at some point pretty soon and visit you in the shop. And I do my best, appreciate the rigor. I do my best, which is all I can do. And I want everyone who says, hey, Clay, I think you made a mistake, right, to let me know that you think I made a mistake or I wasn't rigorous enough in my exploration. Here's a source, Clay, maybe you didn't consider and you want to go look at it. I am more concerned with knowing the truth and being able to talk about the truth than defending a particular I am right position, right, on this particular topic. So please, fact check me. I am totally open to that idea. So here's also another sort of really interesting slide. It says consumers purchase across chocolate segments, right? And so what it does, it's number one, it says fine chocolate. And the definition for fine chocolate for the survey is handmade chocolate truffles or bean-to-bar chocolates. So that's the definition of fine for the study. It says that fine chocolate consumption is stable, right, from 2021. So in 2018, 27% of consumers purchased fine chocolate. In 2021, it's 29%. This year, 29% in this survey purchased fine chocolate. What's important here, I think, to go take a look at is the fact that the definition of mainstream chocolate is candy bars, Hershey, Snickers, and Baby Ruth. So that's the definition of mainstream chocolate, candy bars for the most part, right? Premium is based on brands for the most part. Lindt is a brand. Ghirardelli, which is owned by Lindt, is a brand. Ferrero as a brand, but it's not product based. I might say that like Nutella is a mainstream product, whereas Rochers are considered to be a premium product. I don't know where Nutella fits into this mainstream premium segmentation, but it's what it says is that 88% of consumers, right, purchase pretty much exclusively what we think of mainstream chocolates. That 75% of 75% of consumers will purchase mainstream and premium chocolates. 29% of consumers do artisan chocolates. But what this says is that there is some crossover, right? That when people so I might consume a Hershey bar, but then I might also buy a Ferrero Rocher. That makes sense. Would I then buy a bean to bar, a craft chocolate bar? Maybe not. Right now, it would be interesting to see, and they don't say this, and I would like to know, is that how segmented the fine and artisan category is. So of the people who preferentially say they purchase fine/artisan chocolate, how many of those also purchase mainstream chocolate? And how do their purchasing pattern changes? Like, where is most of their money spent? So my guess is that if I'm primarily a mainstream chocolate consumer, that I spend very little money in my fine artisan world. My guess is if I'm a fine and artisan person, I spend relatively little money in mainstream chocolate. If I'm a premium chocolate, I probably dabble a little bit in both, right? So there's some stuff I would like to know a little bit more about. And it may be that in the crosstabs to this, because this is just the executive summary, maybe in the crosstabs to this, that data do exist. Those data do exist, but it's not here. But again, it's interesting for you, right, to understand that here is the National Confectionery Association. It's the largest such association in the United States, right? And here's their definitions. Here's how they're defining the market. Now, this market is not based on price, right? Which is a little bit interesting, because when I did my original rating and reviewing system around the concept of value, price ranges were an integral part of it. So I could say, here is an American style chocolate, right, in the mass market premium category in terms of price. And for those two things, this is, how would I rate it on a scale of 1 to 7, from not worth the calories to exceptional, right? Which was the range. I put names on the numbers. And so it was all focused on value. And so that wouldn't work. That definition doesn't fit this definition of the marketplace. And so it's fine. It's, trying to map. So I would say that the mainstream market would be, my original thinking, well, this is back in 2001, was $15 a pound or less. And I didn't touch it. I wanted the next market. So the mass market premium would be, Lindt and Ghirardelli, $15 to $25 a pound, and the fine and artisan would be above $25 a pound. Right? So I might be able to map them. Again, this was back in 2001, but it's another way of thinking about the market, and this is why it's important as you start thinking about positioning your products in the marketplace. Before I get to the last one here, so number one, there seems to be a lot of contradictory information on true Criollo pods. Do you have any photos of the true pod or any input information that may help? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would have to go and look through my archive to see if I have anything which could be guaranteed as a Criollo. One of the challenges, I mean, I know some people who do, and so I should be able to find some. So I will do my best. But it would be representative of just one sample. I mean, there is, if you look at the phenotypology of cocoa pods, even within, I would look at Amelanato forastero, it's fairly homogeneous. But if I look at other varieties, there's not as much homogeneity in terms of what the pod phenotype, what the pods look like. And a lot of that has to do with what parent plant is contributing the pollen. So you have the tree, which is part of the genetics, like it might be the mother, right? And then you have the tree that's donating the pollen, right? The father, right? And what the pod looks like is going to be dependent upon that cross to some extent. So if you have the flowers which are being pollinated from pollen from a tree which is self-compatible, which means I can pollinate myself, then you can stay within a fairly narrow range of external physical characteristics, what we call phenotypes. And so it's really, really a challenge just to look at the outside of a pod and guarantee to know what it is. That's just really, really difficult, unless you're very, very careful in terms of how you plant and things like that. But let me see what it is that I can do about that. We seem to be a little closer to understand where the origin of criollos are, which appears to be somewhere in Colombia. I did an episode of Pod Safe Chocolate where we talked about that in the last couple of months. But we have this basic idea that we have two structure groups. So you have the Forastero structure group and the Criollo structure group. And within the Criollo structure group, we have, just a very, very narrow range of distinct genetic varieties. And within the Forastero group, this is where we see a lot of. So we have the Amelanado Forastero variety. We have Contomaná, we have Purus, Curare. There are a bunch of Nacional is a Forastero. So it's very, very complicated. But I am going to be in Brussels at the end of the month. I'm going to be talking with a cocoa researcher when I'm there. Zoe Papalexandratu, whom I met working in Nicaragua for Ingemann. And I will see what she has in the way of photographs of what we might call as true criollos, and how we might extrapolate from a photo of a true criollo to criollos more generally. I think it's a really interesting question, and I will do my best to find an answer for you, but it's not going to be in the next week. I can tell you that. Right? So the next bit of news here from the NCA study, right, is that despite what we may think that dark chocolate is becoming more and more preferred by American consumers, that turns out not to be the case. Right? So, right, at least according to this study by the National Confectioners Association. So if we look at 2018, the number of consumers who said, I prefer milk chocolate was 37%. And if we look at it in 2024, that number is 40%. Right? If we look at dark chocolate in 2018, it would have been 31%. And today it's 28%. Right? And we find an increase in interest in white chocolate. And then you have people who said, chocolate, I'm all in, right? Which is, it's gone down slightly, but it's within probably the margin of error of the study. So there's some people who appear to be ambichocolatous, and I'll eat anything, I don't care. As a professional, I fit into that category, right? Right, I have to taste everything, no matter what it is. I need to be open. I can't prejudge anything. I need to give anything that I consume an opportunity on its own to impress or disappoint. So I definitely fit into any and all, but it turns out that there is a larger percentage of the population, again, from 37% 6 years ago to 40%, who prefer, right, to purchase milk chocolate. Now, it would be interesting to note, again, I don't have the crosstabs here. It would be interesting to note how much of that might be price driven, because milk chocolate, because it has less cocoa and more sugar and milk and other ingredients, whether the price increases on milk chocolate have gone slower, right? And the other thing is that this chocolate also includes candy bars, right? So again, I need to see the crosstabs to find out exactly how this works. But if I'm a chocolate maker, right, and I'm making chocolate, what this says is, okay, a lot more consumers are saying, I want milk chocolate. So you need to offer at least one milk chocolate. People are saying, ooh, I'm buying more white chocolate. Offer a white chocolate made from undeodorized cocoa butter, right? If you need to add inclusions in order to bring the price down, do that. But people are purchasing white chocolate. But that the sales of dark chocolate have gone down, right? Maybe due to price, but what it says is, oh, maybe I need to rethink my product mix, which is what again, looking at it from the small craft chocolate maker perspective, that's what we need to know. Which is, so consumers understand, this is the last content slide of the presentation. It's very short. Most consumers enjoy chocolate 1 to 2 times per week. All right. Only 12% of the population consumes chocolate every day. Again, the crosstabs don't say in which form, and I don't know preference tendencies. I don't know, fine/artisan chocolate buyers tend to eat it more often, whereas mainstream chocolate makers tend to eat it less often. I would tend to think it's the other way around. So people who are buying candy bars might eat it more often, right? Or, because things like lentils, candy colored lentils, M&Ms and things like that fit into that category as well. It'd be interesting to know how those fit, right? Right. Whereas 11% only partake a few times a year. So I'm going to eat a lot of chocolate around Halloween. I'm going to eat a lot of chocolate about Valentine's Day. I'm going to eat a lot of chocolate around Easter. But for the rest of the year, maybe I consume chocolate ice cream, right? And brownies aren't in here. Baked goods aren't in here, which is, again, from a confectionery association perspective, makes sense that we're not talking about baked goods, but it provides an incomplete understanding of the marketplace. I will tell you, hands down, is that if you want to make the most money out of the chocolate that you make, sell it as brownies, or cupcakes. Sell it as a baked good, and you'll be able to make a lot more money from it. All right, so just that is that you have a group of the population that eats it on a regular basis, but only a couple of times a week. You have only about 10, 12% of the population eats on a daily basis. Again, I'd like to know where in that mainstream premium artisan / fine, I'd like to know those crosstabs a little better. And then you have about the same number of people who eat it, who consume it daily, consume it only a couple of times a year. So what that might suggest is that you might have different products which aim at different consumption habits. Right? So for the consumers who enjoy chocolate once or twice a week, it might be something. You might have a slightly lower priced item you need to ask, right? So for people who are purchasing it daily and who are looking at for as a reward, but don't necessarily want to spend huge amounts of money at it. But what it says is that 10% of the market is situational. So you should have something for the major chocolate consuming holidays, which is themed to chocolate consuming holidays. And by the way, I wasn't planning the segue, but if you go to the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now, you'll see that pinned to the top rail is a new classified. It just listed yesterday, a sale of holiday themed thermoform chocolate molds. So these are thermoform molds, thin plastic molds, but there are 585 sheets of molds that represent over 175 shapes. So here's 3 Halloween ones, a pumpkin, a bat, and a witch. But there are over 7,000 mold cavities. So if this is something that interests you, it's a little late for Halloween, but they have New Year's, Valentine's Day, Easter, and all that kind of stuff. It's a chance to get a lot of molds at a really, really discounted price. And from the same seller later on, there's another like 50,000 molds that they want to sell. So just if you're interested, the details on how to contact the seller of this are on the page, right? And let them know. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that's going on. So finally, I think that the thing that is most interesting about this aspect of the study is what they said is that there's a generational difference. So 74% of boomers think that, American boomers, think that chocolate belongs in a happy, balanced lifestyle. Now, as you get to younger and younger and younger, from Gen X to millennials to Gen Z, this goes down slightly. So on average, 72% of Americans feel that chocolate belongs in a happy, balanced lifestyle. 74% are boomers, older, right? I'm a boomer, right? Whereas only 70% of Gen Z believes, right? And it would be again, I don't have the crosstabs and I don't know if they ask any questions about why that is the case. So for example, if I was attracting Gen Z, I might focus my marketing and new product development around healthier for you, better for you, as opposed to just, hitting the bliss point. I want something. So I need to understand that a little bit more. But this is where the value of these things are. You can take a look at this executive summary and figure out what's going on. So I also want to do a quick shout out to Mayana. Just joined, rewatch later. Greetings from Ontario. We're in Ontario, Canada. So thank you very much for letting me know. Glad to hear I'm glad to hear. So it looks like we got Australia and Colorado and Canada who've checked in today. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, man, we're almost at the end of the hour. 50 minutes through, there's so much more to talk about. So, so one of the things I do want to mention is that for anybody who's been a part of listening to Pod Safe Chocolate episodes over the last month, at the end of the month, so on Friday, October 25th, I'm going to be in Brussels. I am going to be speaking at the annual symposium of the British Society of Flavors. The topic is chocolate. I'm going to be co-presenting with Zoe Papalexandratou, who's a PhD in cacao fermentation. And I've been talking a lot about cacao fermentation recently, new fermentation. One of the things that I'm really, really excited to be able to do at this presentation is I mentioned a researcher by the name of Bertus Eskis. Bertus is the inventor of something called Trotmix. And why I'm mentioning that is that there was an article on the Chocolate Professor website by Luke Owen Smith, who is down in New Zealand, who talks about the wild new world of flavor fermentation in cacao. It's an interesting article, but it lacks historical depth. I mean, I like Luke. I've had him on as an episode of the Chocolate Life Live. I used to live in New Zealand, so I have a close affinity to things going on in New Zealand. However, one of the things that Luke completely misses is that even though he did mention that Valrhona has a process they call double fermentation, right? And so double fermentation, which this article says is co-fermented, is where you add things into the fermentation pile and the flavors. So you could add orange juice, for example, and the orange juice would be absorbed into the bean during the course of fermentation, and the chocolate that you make would then have an orange flavor to that. And so there are many things you could add to the fermentation pile, and that's what they're talking about, cocoa, co-fermenting chocolate. What they do mention is that Valrhona, right, has its double ferment, but they did not mention the guy who developed and patented the process as Trotmix, right? So there is this really, really important aspect of the story which is completely unreported. Now, so Eskis has been involved in lots of really, really interesting fermentations over the course of the last 20 some odd years. He's working on a project in Cote d'Ivoire. In 2025, that project is going to be producing 1,000 metric tons of cocoa, and they're processing it into chocolate in Cote d'Ivoire. And I have pre-production samples of 3 different chocolates, which are made from the same genetics. So it's all a Melanato Forastero, which is generally considered to be a bulk cocoa. The ICCO definition of bulk is capable of producing only chocolate flavor, right? And these Melanato Forasteros, through steering protocols during fermentation, produce chocolates with 3 different flavor profiles, which would be considered to be cacao fino. So very, very fruit forward or very, very spice forward. And because the way the fermentation process works, the Eskis's patented fermentation processes work. What they do is they focus on reducing acidity and bitterness naturally. And when you reduce acidity and bitterness naturally, what that does is it enables the flavor chemical to the flavor in finished chocolate to come to the surface because they're not hidden by bitterness and acidity. And if this goes into production and the idea becomes widely adopted, we have to rethink entirely, right, our idea of what proper fermentation is, right, and what the flavor potential for cocoa is when it comes to chocolate. It's a challenge because big chocolate is focused on cocoa flavor. 95% of the recipes for 95% of all the chocolate that's consumed in the world are based around bulk flavor profiles, the flavor of West Africa, a Melanato Forastero cocoa, the reference flavor of cocoa that is Ghana. That's where that's what the industry wants. And so, if I can produce a fully fermented cocoa with no bitters and no astringency, and I can do it in 2 days, right? as opposed to 5 to 7, and it works just as well on CCN51 as it does on that, as it on every variety. What does that do for the way we think about fine flavor cocoa versus bulk cocoa? So we're at the very, very beginning of a really interesting revolution when it comes to understanding fermentation. And unfortunately, this article, while it is interesting, misses an important bit of the history of this fermentation process, and because it does so, and it does so in service of a particular approach to chocolate making, I think it misunderstands what the potential of these new fermentation protocols are. And it focuses only on what do we do when we add flavors to the fermentation pile. And while that's interesting, it turns out that it's going to be, a very, 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 very small percentage of the marketplace. Farmers are going to want to do this for chocolate makers who want to be able to experiment with doing this. And for the people who are doing it, it's like great stuff. Fu Wan's an amazing chocolate maker. They do some stuff. I'm not a fan of 2-ingredient chocolates, but I understand, the Dandelion is working on this process as well. So, and if you like 2-ingredient chocolates, they're great for some of this, but they are working with things like Coco Camilli in Tanzania. They're working with the Regal plantations in India. They're working with Uncommon, so Maya Mountain in Belize. All of these things are stretching the definition of what we accept out of fermented cocoa beans. But I'm really interested to see what happens when we change the purpose. So yes, fermentation does reduce bitterness. It creates acidity, right? Because the pH of a fresh cotyledon is below 7, right? But it's not so far below 7 that it's really, really acidic. And the acidity is generated during fermentation. But if I have fermentation protocols that are, number one, focused on reducing bitterness and reducing astringency, and I can also add the trot mix, the addition of co-fermentation flavors into that, there is an enormous range of flexibility that we haven't yet thought about in cocoa. And it's going to challenge our notion of what we should expect from cocoa fermentations. So I think that's a really, really interesting notion, something that we should really, really think about going forward. Again, I'm going to be tasting 3 chocolates from these fermentations at this symposium by the British Society of Flavors at the end of October. It's a little bit of a risk because they're being shipped from the Ivory Coast to Brussels. I haven't had a chance to taste any of them yet. But that's part of the fun of what these opportunities lie. And I have a chance to present this to new product development people at Cargill. And I'll be working with Zoe Papalexandratu, who's an expert in cocoa fermentation. So we'll get a chance to figure out how all this works and what it means. So I'm really, really excited to be able to do all of those things. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to be in Brussels on Saturday, the 25th of October, Saturday is the 26th of October, and you'd like to join me on a chocolate tour of Brussels, we'll be meeting somewhere near the Grand Place, maybe down by the Mannequin-Piece, in the morning, and then we'll do a walking tour of Brussels and chocolate. So if you're interested, email me or put a comment in today's post, and we'll get back to you and I'll let you know the details. The final thing I'm going to talk about today, even though I have a lot of things that I could talk about, there may be one more because I noticed that I have something bookmarked and I don't remember what I bookmarked, is the increasing use of artificial intelligence to be able, so this says crystal ball for flavor trends, and I disagree completely with this positioning in this article. It is not a crystal ball for flavor trends. Flavor trends are self-fulfilling prophecies. If the flavor house says that the trend for the next season is mint, then that's going to be the flavor trend. If the flavor trend for the next season is, rose petals or honey, that's what the flavor trend is going to be. And so it's not a crystal ball for flavor trends, right? What it is it says to the flavorist, somebody who's working in new product development, whether that's a retail product or it is a product which is going to be sold to a flavorist. So it's going to be a flavoring compound or a chemical which can be used to combine with other chemicals to create a flavoring compound. whether that's an oil-based compound, water-based, or some other delivery medium for the flavoring. And we're talking about the aroma chemicals, the ones that interact with the nose. We're talking about the taste chemicals, the ones that interact on the tongue. Both of those things in conjunction with the way the cocoa butter melts in your mouth, right? Mouthfeel, texture, the way it works in your memory, right? All of those things contribute to flavor, right? So it's much more complicated. And I talked about that, in a recent episode when we talked about taste and flavor and what are the differences between the two. And it's really, really easy to get in casual conversation to get them mixed up, but we want to be careful about them. So AI. So what this AI says is based on what we know about flavors that are popular, and we can talk about that. We can quantify what those are. We can take sales data, and then we can take analytical chemistry data, and then we can say, here is a combination of aroma chemicals, taste chemicals, and textures, which are likely to create a product which is going to be successful in the marketplace, which is different from a crystal ball for trends, right? But this becomes a way to speed up the new product development process by focusing in on things which are more likely to be successful and to quickly prune away from the decision tree things that are less likely to be successful. And one of the reasons why this came to mind is that as a part of my preparation for this, for the British Society of Flavor Symposium, is that number one, there is going to be a presentation on the use of AI in new product development for chocolate confectionery and chocolate flavoring. I'm really interested to see what that looks like. And then in my research, I've also identified that this is being used extensively in industrial beer brewing, that people are looking to develop new flavors of beers. And what they're doing is they're using AI, right, to go through and saying, here are what we know about, for example, West Coast IPAs, and we can characterize West Coast IPAs. And we might say is here's a new West Coast style IPA that is different from existing ones, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to use AI to help us determine, to some extent, what the recipe should be, based on what we know what all these other recipes are. So it's being done in beer. I'm sure it will be done in wine. It will be done all over the place. Here we have sugar candy confectionery, which is the picture that's shown here. But it's an interesting article if you're at all interested in this. If you're at home, I don't think ChatGPT is going to do this for you. It just doesn't have the data necessary. Though there's no training data that will enable you to get the massive amount of information that you need in order to be able to do this on a commercially available AI. You might be able to put specific training data into a commercial AI, but you'd need to find that training data in order to do it. So it's interesting. It's an interesting kind of thing. It is a future for industrial confectionery making and other foods. We're going to see the use of AI to try to predict flavors which are more likely to be successful. So flavors and textures that are more likely to be successful. Now, as we talked about in the previous episode, in pursuit of the bliss point. So we're looking at that optimal combination of fat and sugar, right, and carbohydrates, right, and salt. We're looking for that optimal as modified by the way things melt in the mouth or break down in the mouth. So using AI in faster pursuit of the bliss point. And it's the bliss point. It's important to note that the bliss point of chocolate is different from the bliss point of wine, is different from the bliss points of beer. They're different conceptions in the sense that they have different vector spaces. So axes, right? Different components that I'm worried about. But this is so in the world of professional flavoring, and in the world of new product development, this is going to be something that is going to supercharge the development process over the course of the next several years. So I just wanted to get that in there before we go. One more highlight for today. Close, not entirely sure. This is what this is. It's another post. So this is a website called Hellenic shipping news, right? And look at all this advertising. There's an insane amount of advertising in here for a very, very small amount of content. So there may be like less than 100 words. But what's interesting about this is we're now talking about the 24-25 season. All the things we've been talking about with respect to cocoa have been the 2023-2024 season. And then we've only seen the futures markets for what's going on in next year, 2024-2025. What this says is that in Ivory Coast, the amount of cocoa that has reached the port, right, as of the 6th of October is down 74% from this time last year. What that suggests is that people who are taking a look at how the price of cocoa is going to do, right, and they're assuming that the supply is going to increase, this is a bit of negative information around that. It says that, okay, we've just started the 24-25 season, and we would normally, instead of having 50,000 tons show up at the port, we've got 13,000 tons, which is not a solid basis for assuming that the amount of cocoa is going to increase next year, and that we can assume that the price is going down. Right. So I'm going to put a link to this. Again, lots and lots and lots of advertising for very, very little bits of information. It will allow me to cut and paste it. I don't know, but if it will, what I'll do is I'll grab the maybe I'll do a screenshot and I'll put the screenshot in, so you don't have to worry about the advertising. But I just wanted to put that out there, that here is a bit of negative information that says that the cost of cocoa may not come down the way people assume. There are a couple more. There's one more thing. We're about 10 past. I'm happy to go. Number one, we talked about EUDR, so the EU deforestation regulations. So there is a new U.S. FDA food traceability rule. So I'm going to put a link to this. It's a couple of weeks old, but it's reporting metrics for how the FDA investigation process works, major questions for industries impacted by the rule. So there is a new FDA traceability rule. It's probably part of the Food Safety Modernization Act and the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. There might be implications there. So I'm going to put a link to this article. You can read through it and find out, are you affected? So it's important to know that. And then finally, so Consumer Reports in December of 2022 came out with an article and said there's lots of lead and cadmium in chocolate. And it set off a furor. And I still deal with it on a regular basis. People go, can you recommend to me high lead or low lead content, low lead chocolate or low cadmium chocolate? And the answer is, unless you're testing particular batches, there's no way to know, because manufacturers don't tend to test each batch to report on heavy metal content and then put it on the label. They just don't. Right. So, it turns out that there is a relatively new, it says February 17th, right? So the Consumer Reports article hit in December of 2022. So we have a couple of months later, February of 2023, we find out this consumer in New York State, I believe, filed suit against Hue, which is now owned by Mondelez. And so here's the docket report. And what you can do is you can find that there's, the public docket, it looks like it's fairly active, but everything has been posted between February 17th, 2023 and April 14th of 2023. So at least on this docket follower, there's not a whole lot you can find there. So there is a website that follows class action suits. And what you can do is, again, this is from the week after the suit was filed, but they talk about a little bit about what the suit is about, right? So more recently, and so this was an opinion that was published by the presiding judge in a suit against Hue and Mondelez. This is March 1st, 2024. So it is talking about this. So here's, if you read this, and it's not hugely long, So the plaintiff brings this putative class action against defendants Hugh and Mondelez, alleging that the defendants, Hugh and Mondelez, deceptively marketed their dark chocolate bars as clean and simple when they in fact contained significant amounts of lead, which is a breach of express warranty, it's fraud, and it's also in violation of New York State general business law. And so it goes through the background of the suit, talks, from the plaintiff perspective, and it cites the December 22 Consumer Reports article, which mentions that there are products which contain lead and cadmium, and the products which are involved in the suit from Hugh were ones that were talked about in the article as containing high or over the minimum recommended accounts, minimum allowable daily limits according to the state of California. Of course, this was filed in New York. It's unclear to me how a MADL in California affects a consumer in New York. I don't know, right? But here is a pretty good description. The suit also, so Hugh, right, is pushing back, also contends that even if Levy, the plaintiff, has alleged that she purchased products containing lead, she has not established that the amount of lead in the products was unsafe, right? Arguing that Levy cannot rely on California's minimum acceptable daily limit regulations to establish that the alleged level in the bar that she purchased and consumed was unsafe because the regulations have been superseded by a 2018 consent judgment, which set a different threshold. So why are we even looking at this? All right. Again, this is New York law, not California law. So there's a bunch of reasons that Hugh is arguing why the case should be dismissed. But here's the interesting point. Hugh's motion to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction is denied. So Hugh is making all these arguments, and the judge is saying, nah, I'm not going to accept those arguments. And this is relatively recently, the 1st of March. So the suit is going forward. Even there's nothing on this docket tracker. There's nothing on the docket tracker about this particular notice. So we can come down through. I got a couple more highlights. All right. For these reasons, Hugh's motion to dismiss the complaint or stay the proceedings is denied. Levy's motion to file a second amended complaint is granted. And Hugh's motion to redact and seal materials associated with the complaint is granted. Okay, so basically what the judge says is, I'm not convinced that the arguments that there is no standing or there are procedural basis for dismissing the suit apply here. Ms. Levy, you can amend your complaint to go and address some of the deficiencies in the complaint that have been identified here. Again, right, so right, and it's going to trial. Hugh's request to stay the case is denied. So this case is going forward. I don't know how quickly. It's been around already for 18 months or so. Now, there are two other cases here. So this particular website, this is Trader Joe's. So we have somebody who's filed a lawsuit against Trader Joe's. And we have an order which is in part granting and a part denying the defendant's motion to dismiss plaintiff's consolidated complaint. So they're looking for class action status, consolidated class action status. It talks about all sorts of things in here, blah, 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 blah. But, basically, Trader Joe's is making the same complaint, same thing. How do you establish that the actual bar that you consumed, right, was contained the levels of lead or cadmium, which were above the MADL? And how do you prove that you were actually harmed in consuming it, right? So it's, again, you can look through the legal reasoning. It's a different court, right? It's a different judge, right? Where is the binding precedent? Depending on which court they're in, there may or may not. So the court grants the defendant's request for judicial notice, which basically says, they're saying, okay, there's this whole bunch of stuff which should be brought into evidence because it's things like things from the FDA and things like that we just should be. This is here again, FDA documents. Just let's accept them. Let's not go contest them. And then you'll come down through and you'll go through. This is a much longer decision. But if we scroll down towards the bottom, right, what we'll do is I did highlight something here. So we do have notices here. But basically, this court, if I can't find it, because I believe I highlighted it. Yes, plaintiffs argue that whether the presence of these metals make them unreasonable safety hazard is a hotly contested issue. It is, and it's a fact issue. However, the issue here is not a factual dispute. It is pleading deficiency. Another way to put it, plaintiffs cannot just say heavy metals can be unhealthy, and these products contain some level of heavy metals that may or may not be above the MADL, which may or may not apply in New York. Right, the California MADL may not apply in New York. They have to connect the health risks alleged to the levels of heavy metals in the products. They have to be significant enough to be unfit for human consumption or an unreasonable safety hazard. So therefore, right, that aspect of the complaint is dismissed without prejudice, and the court grants the plaintiff's leaves to amend. So there is a deficiency in the pleading, and the court says if you want to fix the pleading, you can do that, and we're going to go ahead, but we're not going to dismiss the case based on pleading deficiencies. So it looks, and this was, when was this published? Again, this is the end of March in 2024. So it's relatively recently. I don't know. Again, I don't see it on the docket anywhere. But what this does is it does give you some indication of where the courts are wrestling with the claims that Consumer Reports is making about the actual health risks that are associated with heavy metals in chocolate bars, and specifically whether the California MADLs, those are the maximum allowable daily limits, whether or not they are the guiding limits. Right? Whether, again, they make sense with respect to Proposition 65 in California, but do they make sense if I'm filing a lawsuit in New York City, and how do I go find plaintiffs to join my class action in California? So, so we'll keep on top of it. It's as one of these briefs or one of these notices says, it is a hotly contested fact issue. Right, to the best of my knowledge, in speaking with Keith Ayub, who's a regular contributor here, he says, there's no reported incident of anybody being admitted to a hospital for heavy metals poisoning, which can be directly attributed to either cocoa or chocolate. So we'll follow that because it's important, because we all love chocolate and we all think it's great for us. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to worry about whether or not our health there's a real serious health impact other than from the sugar and what we're consuming, which, yeah, sugar is a big thing. So before I head out, just a quick reminder that this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. I've got the homepage of The Chocolate Life up right now. There's a green button here. I'm logged in. If you're not logged in, it will say join. You can click on the join button. There's always a free membership, right? If you can support my work by becoming a premium member, always appreciated, but there's lots of demands on people's income these days. So just becoming a free member and showing your support that way is really, really great. But if you've been watching this on YouTube, thumbs up to this video, subscribe to the Pod Save Chocolate channel. And with that, it's been great to have you here. For everybody who's watched from the beginning to the end, thanks for your attention today. And I will be back on Friday. So this is Tuesday the 8th. I will be back on Friday, which is the 11th. 9th, 11th. And then next Tuesday, I'm really, really excited because joining me is going to be Rowan Jacobson. Rowan is a friend and colleague. He's been writing about wild cacao. I met him for the first time in 2008 when my book and his book, The Geography of the American Oyster, my book, Discover Chocolate, were finalists in the International Association of Culinary Professional Book Awards in the technical and reference category. And our paths have crossed on occasion over the course of the last, 16 years now. He's got a new book. That book is called Wild Chocolate. And it's going to be available. It's available today on Amazon. I'm going to be interviewing him next Tuesday about the book. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link on Amazon to purchase this book. So obviously it doesn't increase the price to you, but I get a small percentage, which would be appreciated. It's an interesting book. I haven't completed it. I'm gonna finish it before the episode next Tuesday, and so I'm really excited about that, and really excited to be headed out and going to Brussels. So end of the month, probably not so many episodes because I will be traveling, and then on Friday the 25th, I will be in my seminar in the symposium, so I won't be able to do an episode then. But I do want to thank everybody who's been here today. From the beginning to the end, people who join us after the fact. I will go and update the post for this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate sometime this afternoon. And until the next time, everybody, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Ciao.